Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to avchesslab. My name is Alex. Today, I got for you another crazy, incredible game against the French defense. But before we get to that, if you're new here and you want to learn about openings, middle game ideas, end games, tactics, then consider subscribing to the channel. All right, let's jump to it. We have e4, e6, and b3. In the other game, I showed you how to crush it with g3. In this time around, I decided to play b3. The truth is, at the time, Hikaru was playing a lot of b3, bishop b2, and crushing people with it. So I wanted to copy the man and give it a try myself. So my opponent here went for d5, and I played bishop to b2. Just like in the first game, I ignored the threat here on my pawn on e4. I just wanted to get development. I just wanted to get my pieces out. So my opponent here went for d takes e4, and I played knight to c3. Here, my opponent went knight to f6. I was a little bit surprised by this move, honestly. My opponent at the time was a very famous pawn grabber. So I was expecting him to, instead of playing this knight to f6, to go for this move f5, trying to keep the pawn on e4 for as long as possible. In which case, I was going to hit him with pawn to f3, with full development and great compensation. Instead, my opponent goes for knight to f6. I continue with queen to e2. He goes for bishop to b4. I went ahead and castled, and bishop takes on c3. I told you he was a famous pawn grabber. He is willing to keep this pawn at all costs. So he went ahead and gave me his very strong bishop with bishop takes on c3. To tell you the truth, any other move would have been better. At this point, I already knew that I was going to win this game. It was a great, satisfying feeling. It's only move 6, and I already knew I was going to crush this guy. I went ahead, captured the pawn. Now my rook is open. I'm attacking his queen. He needs to do something with her. He went queen to e7. And here I had an unusual long think. Of course, he's planning to castle soon, hopefully. I was guessing at this point in the game. And I wanted to come up with a way to open up the game in my favor, of course. So I came up with this g4 move. My idea was simple. I wanted to go h4, g5, maybe put my bishop on g2, take the pawn on e4, maybe bishop to d3 with attacking on the h7 square if you were to castle to that side. These were all my ideas here. So instead here, my opponent goes for queen to c5. Of course, he's keeping an eye on the g5 square. So now a pawn up, he was just going to take with check. So not good for me. But I went for h4 anyway, trying to go g5 on the next move. And here my opponent goes pawn to e3. Super interesting move. My opponent wants to, after I take here, and notice that I have to, if I want to take, I have to take with the pawn. If I take with the queen, then he can just trade queens and he'll be absolutely fine. So instead, what he wants to do with this move is to actually vacate the e4 square for his knight. So I took another little bit of a think here, and I came up with a very nice move, bishop to g2. I felt that by sacrificing this pawn, I was going to get a lot of compensation. Now my bishop is controlling the diagonal, so I thought it was a very good move. Here my opponent, of course, took on f2, and I went knight to f3. Notice that I'm down 2 pawns, but I am fully developed. My king is extremely safe behind this very nice pawn shield here. I have a great attack going on the king, and I have, honestly, all my pieces are in play. Now, if you look at the white position, his king's still in the center. I have this great attack, so he doesn't, I'm not sure where he's going with his king, and his queenside pieces, man, they just look terrible. And it doesn't look like he's going to castle to that side if he wanted to anytime soon. So here my opponent went for this move h5. I thought it was a good move, but at the same time, now I knew that his king will be stuck in the center forever. By pushing these pawns forward on the king side, that just meant to me that he wasn't going to go kingside castle. And to go queenside, well, it's just going to be a few moves, to tell you the truth. So here I went for knight takes on f2. My plan was simple. I wanted to remove his only defender of the king. So after he took on g4, I went ahead and I captured with my knight on g4. He went for knight b to d7. Of course, if he goes for knight takes g4, after queen takes g4, look at this lonely king. I'm going to go pawn to c4. Everything's going to be hitting on g7. I have ideas of h5, h6. This other rook can come to the f file. It's going to be nasty. So here, my opponent, of course, went for, after knight takes on g4, he went for knight b to d7. And I continue with c4. Again, opening my bishop, especially hitting this pawn on g7 if this knight ever decides to move. He goes here for c6. And to this day, I cannot understand this move to save my life. My only guess is that he wanted to go for some b5 and maybe open up my king side. But even if he goes for that move, I still don't see the threat. I can just take, he takes, and he can't even take back. My bishop is hitting the rook. I don't get this move at all. But whatever, he played it, and here I went for king to b1. And I really love this quiet move. I wanted to, in many ways, play this move h5. In a lot of variations, I wanted to play this move. But he always had this stupid queen to g5, hitting my king with check and solving all his problems. So now with this little maneuver of king to b1, he doesn't have that queen to g5 check. So I thought it was a very clever move. Maybe it's not good, but I thought it was a clever move. Here he goes, queen to e7, bringing the queen back, giving his king more protection. I go for h5. That was my plan all along with my king to b1. So I continue with it. And here he took on g4 with a knight. A very little trick that I had set up with h5 was that if he had gone for knight takes on h5 instead, I was going to play knight to e5. Now hitting his knight here with two pieces, and he only has the rook protecting. So if he wanted to keep the piece, he needed to go queen to g5. Notice now how important my king to b1 was. And these were the moves that were bothering me. This queen to g5 check, solving all his problems. Imagine if my king was on b1 now. He would just give me a check, I will move, and maybe he can get away with some other move, like maybe, not castling, but his position's still bad. Either way. But this move was bothering me. Here, I could just go knight takes on d7, bishop takes on d7, and man, this bishop f3, I was very proud when I saw this in my calculations. This knight is stuck. It cannot go back to f6 because I take the rook with check and then I take the other rook. This is just nasty. And he cannot go pawn to g6 because, well, my bishop is attacking the rook in that diagonal as well. So very nice geometry. I was going to win a piece in this position, so knight takes on h5 was not really possible. So he goes for, after h5, he goes for knight takes on g4. I take with my queen, and here my opponent goes for f6. In some situations, I guess I understand this move. It's blocking my bishop from attacking the g7 square. It's also preventing my queen from taking now because the queen's taking. But man, just moving these pawns now is going to create a lot more weaknesses around the king. And I took complete advantage of that. And I played bishop to e4 here, switching my bishop to another diagonal. Instead of this diagonal, which is really not doing anything. I mean, it served its purpose there, I guess. Now I'm switching my bishop from going to yet another diagonal, attacking the king, putting the king in check in a lot of variations. Here my opponent went knight to f8, trying to prevent me from going to g6 with my bishop. But here, I had a very beautiful finish. So go ahead, pause the video, try to find it for yourself. Leave the comments down below. Let me know what you think about this position. Go ahead, try to solve it. 2 seconds. All right, guys, so if you saw bishop to g6 check, I mean, I've been mentioning this move, so this should have been very easy for you guys. Then congratulations, it was a very beautiful move. But it's the following after the move that matters. He goes knight takes on g6, only move. Queen takes on g6. And here king to f8. All the moves here lose. If queen to f7, then there's this very nasty rook to f8. The king cannot take because I take the queen. And if the king comes to e7, I take the rook. It's just the same. Game over. So he goes king to f8 in this position. And here I hit him with h6. and my opponent resigned in this position. The reason for this is, for example, I'm gonna give you a few lines just so that you understand why my opponent decided enough is enough. If he goes rook takes on h6, here I can just follow with rook takes, pawn takes, and after bishop takes on f6, when the queen moves, I'm going to hit him with rook to d8 check. It's going to be game over. He's going to have to sacrifice his queen, or it will be checkmate. Another important variation after h6 was to go for pawn takes on h6. But here, again, after bishop takes on f6, I'm hitting the queen, I'm hitting the rook. This rook is coming to the 8. In case that all of this fails, which it was not going to, this other rook can come here. This rook can also come to the f file. I mean, this king is not happy. Another variation after h6 was to maybe go rook to g8, but again, after pawn takes on g7, there's nothing he can do. If rook takes, then rook check. The rook has to go back, and then either queen or rook takes is checkmate. And if queen takes, the same story. I give a check here, and yeah, it's just going to be game over in a few moves. So yeah, very beautiful game. I really liked it. It's just another example of how bad the French defense is. You can just win in so many variations. So go ahead, try it. I've already shown you how to win with g3, now how to win with b3, sacrificing the e4 pawn, which gives you a lot of compensation. So go ahead, if you like this video, give it a like, and if you haven't done so yet, subscribe to the channel. As always, stay safe, have a great day, show respect to your opponent. See you on the next video.